Good evening and welcome to On the Frontline, Climate Justice for the People. My name is Cindy Wiesner with Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, the Rising Majority, and the leadership team of the Frontline. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm calling in from Durham, North Carolina. We are so glad that you're with us here tonight. I will be emceeing tonight's call, but first, let me make this language justice announcement. Spanish interpretation is provided on this call. If you wish to hear the Spanish interpretation, please select the globe icon on your computer or the more or the three-dot icon on your tablet or smartphone. Select language interpretation and choose Spanish in the pop-up. Buenas noches y bienvenidas, bienvenidex al encuentro virtual de la primera línea. Mi nombre es Cindy Wiesner, estoy con Alianza Popular por la Justicia Global y el Rising Majority y el liderazgo de la primera línea. Estoy muy contenta que ustedes estén con nosotros ahora y vamos a comenzar en un minuto. Hay interpretación al español. Si desea escuchar la interpretación en español, favor de seleccionar el icono del globo en la computadora o donde dice more, más en inglés, o los tres puntitos en su tableta o en su teléfono inteligente. Seleccione interpretación de idiomas y después español del menú que aparece. This has been a very emotional week. It's been intense, and I want to really welcome you to On the Frontline, Climate Justice for the People. If you are watching on Zoom, please use the chat to say who you are and tell us where you're joining from and how are you feeling. I know that I am feeling so much rage, some level of relief, sadness, and indignation. For those of you who've been on the Frontline mass calls before, welcome back. If this is your first time and you're joining us, welcome. The Frontline is made up of a historic Black-led multiracial campaign of the Movement for Black Lives, the Working Families Party, United We Dream, and the Rising Majority, and a whole set of partners and individuals all over this country. The Frontline was launched in the wake of the 2020 uprisings, where millions of people flooded the streets in defense of Black life. 11 months after George Floyd was murdered and sparked a global uprising, yesterday's guilty verdict was a critical moment of individual accountability for one police officer, but not the kind of justice that will lead to changing a system. Within 30 minutes of that announcement, Ma'Khia Bryant was murdered. Ma'Khia Bryant, Adam Toledo, Daunte Wright, George Floyd, too many to name, should still be alive today, full stop. Derek Chauvin's guilty verdict does not fix a brutal system of policing rooted in white supremacy that will continue harming Black communities and Black people. We considered canceling tonight's call or reshifting it, but we thought it was important to make the deeper connections about how racial and gendered capitalism makes brown, Black, women, gender nonconforming bodies, young people, elders, poor people, land, water, nature, soil disposable and exploited to be controlled, commodified, and destroyed slowly or violently. We believe that it's important to bring our community together to mourn, to feel, to educate, to agitate, and strategize towards the world we want, where police no longer exist, where safety and the well-being of people and the planet are redefined, and where we are in right relationship to nature. I want to turn it over to my comrade and movement leader, Ashley Henderson, to ground us and reflect on this moment.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Good evening, beloveds. My name is Ashley Woodard Henderson, and I'm the first Black woman co-executive director of the Highlander Research and Education Center in Newmarket, Tennessee, and a proud member of the Movement for Black Lives, the Rising Majority, and leader on the front lines. Before we jump into tonight's call, we just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of valid feelings that we're all arriving with right now. Yesterday afternoon, Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all counts for the murder of George Floyd. This is not justice, y'all, because justice would mean George Floyd was still here, alive and thriving with us today. But we know many of you are feeling a great sense of relief that there was any consequence at all for his murder. I want to be clear that there is space enough in this sacred space that we're building together to feel the righteous rage of frustration about the far too many names that are the cumulative Black death that this state has allowed to happen for far too long. I know that some of you might be feeling relief. Some of you might be reliving the pain of the names of the many people who have been harmed by state-sanctioned violence, by white supremacist violence, by patriarchal violence, and all of the other forms of systemic violence that have been happening in neighborhoods near you. We know that that grief might feel incredibly burdensome right now, and that many of us have been reliving those traumas for the last 11 months at least, that your body has been holding this anxiety. Maybe you're arriving still thinking about the ways that your body is holding questions like, will there even be accountability for George Floyd even now, right? What comes next might be a question that is bringing you anxiety. Many of you might be inspired by an incredible season of uprisings and resistance. And some of you might be exhausted from participating in weeks after weeks, months after months of protest, taking it to the streets. Many of you might feel traumatized by the ongoing killing of Black people by police. You've already heard Cindy raise Dante Wright's name in the middle of George Floyd's trial. And yesterday, literally as we were starting to take a breath, Ma'Khia Bryant, a teenage girl, a Black teenage girl, shot and killed in Columbus, Ohio. So we want to take a moment to sit with one another and get grounded, to recognize that there is space and time for what you're feeling. And in fact, it's critically important to the ability of our movements to actually build holistically for us to recognize our humanity and just get to be human together for a moment before we get into the incredible political education that's going to happen tonight. We want you to think about all of the things that you're feeling and recognize them as being natural. As we move into the next phase of demanding racial justice, economic justice, social justice, climate justice, let's affirm what we know, what is absolutely in our control. First, we made any level of accountability possible. Movement leaders, activists, organizers, culture bearers like yourselves, the family, friends, community members that show up and show out every time something like what happened to George Floyd happens. All of you made it possible. Again and again, our social movements have made the impossible possible. People told us that it would be an impossible dream that law enforcement be held accountable, that there be any consequence for the murder of Black people by police. We saw a shift yesterday. What we also know is that we came together because we believe in Black liberation and we believe in collective liberation, that racial justice is possible and that your liberation is intimately bound up with mine. And what we also know is that we're not alone in this work. We have each other. Our strength is in the power of our people, y'all. What we know for sure is that we keep each other safe. We keep us safe. So Now, I want to invite everyone, as you're willing and able, to join me in a very brief meditation. And if you want, you can close your eyes. You can get comfortable as you can wherever you are. I want you to think about your stomach as a balloon. As you inhale deeply, I want you to gently fill that balloon. Fill it up in your stomach. And as you exhale slowly, I want you to deflate the balloon in your stomach. What we're going to do is we're going to breathe in for 4. We're going to hold for 4. We're going to exhale for 4. We're going to do that 3 times. So again, get comfortable. Start to get into your body. And I want you to take a deep inhale in through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. And exhale. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. And exhale. 2, 3, 4. One more time. In. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. And exhale. 2, 3, 4. We at the Frontline wish for you breath in this world of no easy answers. We wish for you breath in this world of constant change. We wish for you justice, still denied to so many of our people. The day after the verdict, we wish for a new day. We wish for us strength as we do the work to keep our people alive and whole and thriving. Sustained as we sit in the tensions between this conviction and our desire for abolition. As we continue to remind the world that there is no such thing as justice in policing, I wish for you breathe. As we continue to demand structural change, participatory democracy, and reaffirm that the only solution to police brutality in this country is a shift from massive spending on police that don't keep us safe to a massive investment in a shared vision of community safety that actually works. And as we navigate being tired of quick fixes, platinum band-aids, and piecemeal reforms, as we continue to organize for power and governance and justice sustained, as we strive not just for accountability as consequences for actions, but for justice as righteousness in practice. Manifest comfort for the families and loved ones of George, of Anthony, of Dante, of Zadok, of Adam, and just yesterday, Micaiah, and all of the other names, countless names that rest on our hearts. There are too many names. There are too many families that are crying out. We lift up those names. We wish for sweet dreams of a world where white supremacist violence no longer keeps us up at night, nor does it wake us up out of slumber, where we're able to be refreshed and renewed like the dew in the morning. We wish sweet dreams of a world where we're able to breathe free of noose or knee, where we don't carry the weight of grief and despair of stolen Black lives, where we are loud and proud and Black and free, where we dance and sing and express in poetry and lyrics, dreaming and remembering. In our remembering, let us remember who we are, who we've always been, who we shall be, and what is required of us to make these dreams and wishes that we have for each other realities. We, dear loved ones, will be the midwives of a new America. May we see victory May we practice liberation. May we eradicate the world of white supremacy, a racialized economic system rooted in patriarchal violence that is not good for this planet nor for our people. May we see a world free of militarism, of all harm. May we experience the contagious power of deep Black joy. May we live in a world where free Black mamas reign supreme and their babies live long lives. May we make real a liberated South. May we be well. May we be disciplined and rigorous and principled. May we win. May we be free. May we be free. May we be free. So be it. To get involved in this fight to make our freedom dreams a reality, I invite you to follow the movement for Black Lives. I invite you to be a part of a multiracial coalition by joining the Working Families Party and the Rising Majority. Now, let's move into the powerful conversation that we're going to have tonight with some of the most brilliant people doing life-saving work that I know. Let's get into this conversation about climate justice that we came for today. Now I'm going to pass it back to my sister and my comrade, Cindy Wiesner.
Comrade, mi compañera Ashley, just thank you. So powerful. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I was there breathing with you. I hope you all watching were also just feeling the power of those words, those power of may it be so. May it be so. May we be free. Whew. So the Frontline has been doing these mass calls every few weeks since the election last November, through the Biden-Harris administration's first 100 days. One purpose of these calls was to help folks make sense of the moment. So I really appreciated that political and spiritual grounding you did, Ashley. We also, at these mass calls, also engage folks in political education and invite you to take meaningful action, acknowledging the intersection of racial and gendered, economic, and climate justice. The focus of tonight's call is climate and environmental justice. And tonight is actually the last in our series of mass calls. It is an honor to be here with you tonight and this incredible set of visionary leaders, this intergenerational, multiracial panel that you're going to get to hear from. We're so fortunate to have them with us. But the Frontline also has other exciting events and activities coming up. So you know the drill if you've been on these phone calls. We want you, and if you're new to these phone calls, we want you to get involved and continue following the work of the organizations that help start the Frontline and continue to do this work. So I want you to text Frontline to 30403 so we can stay connected. I also want you to save the date for the Keep It 100 teach-in on May 15th from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, where a partnership with Moms Rising and the Frontline will be co-hosting this virtual gathering where organizations like Movement for Black Lives, Fair Fight, Democracy Initiative, United We Dream, It Takes Roots, and many more are hosting tracks to get us ready for this summer and beyond. We will come together to protect our vote, preserve our right to protest and dissent, to fight against police violence, and to fight for the agenda, the political agenda that we want, such as Thrive and Breathe and the PRO Act and so many more. Follow the Frontline on social media for more updates and text Frontline to 30403 to stay informed. I'm here repping the fight for two organizations and sharing some of the fight that we've been involved in around climate justice, but also at the intersection of many other issues. Grassroots Global Justice Alliance is a multiracial, multisectoral, multi-gendered alliance of more than 65 member organizations that's trying to build a mass popular movement in this country for peace, democracy, and a sustainable world. To learn more about Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, go to the link on your screen. The Rising Majority is also a coalition that we're a member of, and it's a coalition that involves labor, youth, abolition, immigrant rights, climate change, feminist, anti-war, anti-imperialist, and economic justice forces to amplify our collective power and to build an anti-racist, feminist left for radical democracy. And if you want to find out more about Rising Majority or stay connected to our ongoing work and campaigns, please text majority to 90975. So folks, here we are on the eve of Earth Day. And for many of us who are already living on the land and in right relationship to nature and fighting for a just transition, every day is Earth Day. But tomorrow is important for another reason. The Biden-Harris administration is convening its first significant meeting to address the fate and future of our planet. This Leaders Summit on Climate is bringing together 40 world leaders ahead of the next major UN, United Nations talk on climate change that will be happening in November. After 4 years of negligent inaction under Trump, and in fact, pushing us way back, Biden is hoping to show the rest of the world that the US is ready to step up and get serious about tackling climate change. Since his first day in office, Biden has made some significant moves on climate. He's signed the executive order to rejoin the Paris Accords. He paused new federal oil leases. He canceled the Keystone XL pipeline permit. He even created a White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council composed of frontline leaders from Indigenous, Black, immigrant, and working class communities, including environmental justice leader Miya Yoshitani, who you'll hear from later tonight. But we know that's not enough. We lost 4 critical years during the Trump regime, and the Paris Accord isn't ambitious enough. And we said that 5 years ago. The pause on new federal federal oil leases doesn't apply to Indigenous nations and territories. And while Biden is bringing on people of color as advisors, we have yet to see action that centers communities of color who are directly and disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis. But this week, progressive members of Congress are introducing a number of bills that go much further than what Biden has proposed. And those bills are being informed by movements in this country from EJ communities, by environmentalists, by labor unions, by people concerned about what's happening, right? And for example, Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez introduced the Green New Deal for public housing that would update housing infrastructure and transition it towards renewable energy. Representative Cori Bush introduced the Green New Deal for cities, towns, counties, and nations to directly fund frontline communities who are most impacted by climate change and pollution and the economic crisis. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey authored a Green New Deal resolution. And a proposal should be introduced this week for a civilian climate corps, which would put 1.5 million people in good paying jobs to rebuild our communities, transform our infrastructure, and begin to halt the climate crisis. So we're here tonight to educate each other on what real climate solutions are and how we're going to win them. In order to radically redirect the future of the planet, we need to build an anti-racist, regenerative feminist economy. That's what we talk about at Grassroots Global Justice Alliance with many feminists around the world and many environmental justice folks. So I'd like to take a minute and invite everyone to really see that future in front of us. I want you to close your eyes and, as Ashley reminded us, to breathe and give yourself permission to be bold, right? Let us not imagine, let's not imagine what it would look like if we had an anti-racist regenerative feminist economy. Let's imagine it what looks like when we realize that. What do you see when you imagine an economy that centers life? No price tags on water, air, or land. What does it feel like when you and your family members have jobs that treat people and the planet with dignity? What do we see when an economy and a political system prioritizes life and not death? If you're on Zoom, please use the chat to share what you envision. Right? Share what you're envisioning. Share the wants, our desires, our demands, right? Our wishes. And what I want to tell you tonight is that those things can actually, we can manifest them, we can organize around them, we can make it happen. We already have Indigenous leaders, Black leaders, women, queer, trans, and gender nonconforming leaders who are ready to shepherd us into this future. Our leaders are the folks on the ground, the folks protecting water, defending land, saving seeds, promoting food sovereignty, and organizing people power. These voices are the ones that all these heads of state, all these world leaders should be listening to tomorrow. And I am so proud here that we have some of those leaders with us tonight. First up is my good friend and mentor and global leader, Tom Goldtooth, founder of Indigenous Environmental Network, who's going to break down the difference between false solutions and real just transition. Next, we'll hear from climate justice struggles across this country and territory. We're going to learn about the ongoing criminalization of water protectors and land defenders, but more importantly, how community is organizing and moving us towards community wins. We will hear from Silas, who has the honor of being our youngest panelist, an Anishinaabe youth who is active in the fight to stop Line 3 pipeline in Minnesota. We have Monica Lewis Patrick, amazing, fierce fighter who is fighting for clean water in her community in Detroit. And we have Reagan Patterson, who is advancing and part of a whole movement of the advancing the red, black, and green New Deal as a way to move us towards a vision of a regenerative economy that makes sure to prioritize reparations and Black people's lives and needs. We will also hear from Chris Matthews, a social justice music maker. And to close us out, Miya Yoshitani, a good compañera and friend of mine and longtime organizer and activist, will share her analysis on the Thrive Agenda and the current movement moment. Here at the front lines, we've been focusing a lot on the Thrive Agenda because it is the first installment of a movement-generated recovery plan that addresses the economy and ecology by creating millions of jobs that center the dignity for people and the planet. Like the Breathe Act, the Thrive Agenda is framed around divesting and investing, divesting from the military, divesting from the police, from fossil fuels, and investing in education, healthcare, Medicare for all, and green jobs for our people. At the center of all of this work, we're doing it in reverence and respect for Mother Earth, for Pachamama. And we're hoping that tonight's call connects a lot of dots for you. We have a very full agenda, so we might go past the hour, end about 9:10 Eastern time, but all of our speakers are going to be amazing. So please stay with us. You don't want to miss any of it. So now we will hear from my mentor and movement leader, Tom Goldtooth of the Indigenous Environmental Network.
Um, Thank you for the opening. Ashley, Haumetakia P in our Dakota language. It's very important to use that opening because that means hello, all my relations, my relatives. And uh, I really appreciate the planning team asking me to do a 10-minute presentation on a very complex topic, and that's the way it's been set up by the Matrix. I call the Matrix that entity out there that has such control over our lives, and this issue of climate justice with the focus on some of the false solutions that are being supported by the big green groups, big oil, and government. But as we have started to look at this way back in 1998, when we were called together by our elders, our spiritual leaders, our traditional practitioners, our women's societies, and our grassroots, that we need to step in. We need to step into that space with our elected tribal leaders, our tribal governments, who have been approached by some of these dirty corporations, mining corporations, and that we need to start working together and giving information to each other. It's a very important time to talk about this and to have this webinar tonight because there's a lot of forces out there that do not have our best interests in mind. We know that of the many people in struggle, the people of color, the poor white folks, our workers, the unions, and especially the First Peoples, our indigenous peoples of these lands and territories, not only in North America, but throughout the Americas, all the way to the tip of South America and throughout the world. It's a good time to talk about this because I heard the word liberation. I heard that. I heard about freedom. And what I'm going to talk about as quickly as I can is about a system of privatization, commodification of Mother Earth, of nature, of the trees, of the soils, uh, of life itself, the mangroves, even the plankton in the oceans. Everything is up for sale under a system of financialization of nature. It's a capturing of the spirit when we are making a movement towards a feminist economy, and that allows our women to step up. I live in a region where we have the Anishinaabe people, we have our Eastern Dakota, we have the Ho Chunks in Wisconsin, we have the Menominees and the Potawatomis, north of us, the Crees. And in these cultures, the women are the protectors of the water. That makes sense because the mini Wachoni, the passing of life and the breaking of the water and the babies that come out of the womb, the women are the protectors of the water. The men, we are the protectors of the fire. So we have roles and responsibilities. So what I want to talk about is about the carbon markets. I think uh, the PowerPoint is up on the screen. Yes? I just need to check here. Okay, I have a PowerPoint. Can someone put it on the screen? Hillary, are you there? Okay, I guess the PowerPoint is not available. It's on the main. Okay, so it's on there, right? On. Okay, we have two screens, so I'm going to continue here. Sorry. Um, and so these are the what we call carbon markets, techno fixes as well. And this is what I package up as climate capitalism, and it results in greenwashing by polluters, such as Enbridge, the Canadian corporation Enbridge. Those working on the Line 3 are familiar with Enbridge, but it includes Shell and Chevron and many other fossil fuel corporations here in the US, but Canada and globally. Slide two, please. On slide two, I have two graphs, and I'm not going to go into the details, but it shows in the line that keeps going up on both of them. One is the temperature increases globally. The one on the right is the ocean temperatures. Those of you that study the science of climate change, it's very critical to watch the temperature in the oceans. It's affecting our indigenous peoples in the polar regions of the north. The ice is melting. They have an ice culture. I have talked with them. They are part of our network. Slide three. Many of you have heard, it was mentioned by Cindy, uh, the United Nations brought people and governments together in 2015. This was in Paris, France. This was part of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it was the 21st year of the conference of these governmental parties of the world that have come together to figure out how they're going to solve the climate uh, crisis. And it's what we called the COP21. And we make a joke for those of us that have gone to the UN. We say it's corporate control. There's so many corporations in the hallways of these UN meetings. And despite the hype, many of you may have been told that the Paris Agreement was good, but no, it failed to address the climate crisis. It has no legally binding emissions reduction plan, only voluntary. The agreement advanced pollution trading mechanisms that allow polluters to purchase carbon offsets, carbon credits, and continue the extremely dangerous level of emissions releases. Here in the United States, Canada, the tar sands, one of the major dirty industrial complexes of the world. And I've been fortunate to travel throughout the world, seeing a lot of this devastating mining projects, but the tar sands in Canada. And I want to come back to the Canadian, well, the corporations operating in the tar sands, because they are participating in carbon trading as well. So this agreement, the Paris Agreement, allows countries to claim reductions through these pollution trading schemes that are written in the agreement as results-based payments, rather than requiring actual reductions of pollution emissions at the source. So if you hear in these proposals that may come to you, or you're maybe some environmental organization is going to be telling you, well, carbon trading is good. It offsets. I mean, they will tell you that it addresses the emissions issues. It reduces emissions. No, it doesn't. I don't have the time to go into the details of that, but I have some references on studies that say that's not the situation. It's a trading agreement and it's not a climate agreement. So the Paris Agreement, of course, as we look at the figures, it will lead us to a 3.5 degrees of warming. It's not going to get us to 2.0. It's not going to get us to 1.5. We need to know that. And we need to organize a resistance movement for real solutions. It lifted up a concept called net zero emissions. I'm going to talk a little bit more on a couple slides about that. Um, but it does set into place the relationship of government, private corporations, investors like the World Bank around a system that does not reduce pollution. Um, let's go to the next slide. What we're seeing because of these false solutions to climate change is expansion of fossil fuel investments and developments. It's business as usual. In the report that our Indigenous Environmental Network was part of, is a report in 2020, Banking on Climate Change. That report revealed that 35 global banks have expanded the fossil fuel sector with more than $2.7 trillion dollars in the 4 years since the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. People need to know that. And there's something seriously wrong with this picture. Slide 5 next. Many of you remember Standing Rock 2016 to 2017 in the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline. I was there. We were there. It seemed like the world was there. The black snake was there. Today, we see the black snake has two heads. Around the head of extractivism, which is the continued mining. It allows the continued mining of the tar sands, of frack oil, not only in Canada, but it allows the processing of this and the exportation of the tar sands oil to be shipped through pipelines down south through our territories here in northern Minnesota, through lands and waterways, and in called Line 3, and Silas is going to talk about that. But the second head also is involved in this market based mechanism of capitalism, carbon trading, including techno fixes around carbon capture and storage technologies, carbon capture use and storage uh, um, technologies, which is just the recycling of the carbon that they captured. And this allows, again, the private corporations to greenwash and to look good on paper by participating in these carbon market regimes. Um, we we are working to defend the sacred. Not only do we have to shut down the tar sands, stop fracking, and halt pipelines, we have to oppose this trading market regime, this system that is being lifted up and pushed right now in this country. Many of the green groups are leaning towards that way, and some of the legislation that we're seeing the same picture in the Senate Ag Committee. They are actually supporting this kind of legislation that's going to strengthen the carbon offset, carbon mechanisms in agriculture. So this is all a distraction from fossil fuels from taking real action. Next slide. I want to go briefly to the thing called net zero emissions. We are telling Alexandria Ocasio Cortez to not use that term. Drop the word net. We all agree we need to work towards a zero emissions goal. Net zero includes what's now a big buzzword, nature-based solutions. A lot of people say, "Wow, that's good. We got to look at nature. Nature is a solution." But what is happening is through capitalism and the bank system, they are they are looking at nature from a commodity perspective, natural climate solutions, natural capital. They're looking at our trees, our forests, our soils, agriculture, and land itself in a privatization scheme. So at the end of the day, who owns this? It's not us anymore. It's not the small farmers. It is the polluters who are investing in this with carbon credits and carbon offsets. So they're buying the carbon. They're buying the carbon. And before you trade anything in a market system, you got to determine whose property right it is. A property right issue. So they're buying the property right to nature itself. We have to look at that, and it's in the forest and ecosystem. You'll hear the term in some of the legislation, regenerative agriculture. That's carbon farming, soil carbon, blue carbon in the oceans. There even is a legislation being proposed on blue carbon, conservation and biodiversity offsets. And we got to be really cautious on the green bonds. And yes, we got to be, as the United States, accountable to our fair share, addressing climate injustice in the global south. But that money that is being proposed to be dumped into is the Green Climate Fund. Google search that. Internationally, the Green Climate Fund is another mechanism that puts money into what I'm talking about. Right now, there are human rights abuses in local communities and indigenous communities in Africa. There's issues in South America where indigenous peoples and local people don't have access to these trees, and they've been fenced off because the private corporations own that now. So geoengineering technologies, number 7. Next slide is the violation of the sacred. It's what our indigenous spiritual people have been telling me when I consulted with them way back in late 1990s and early 2000. We've had ceremony on these mechanisms. It's a violation of the sacred in the privatization of the sky, the atmosphere, the carbon, the methane. So carbon pricing is a privatization of the air we breathe in. The trees also breathe in air. In 1854, our visionary chief Seattle at that time said, "How can you buy or sell the sky?" And it's a very important issue of what I'm talking about. Next slide is the picture of big oil, the oligarchies. It's a global issue, and they're all participating and looking at these. They're investing, like Shell Oil is invested $300 million um, in nature-based solutions. Next slide. Um, some of the legislation I just wanted to flag: Biden's climate and energy plans and legislative agenda includes what I've been talking about. The climate plan includes carbon capture and storage, techno fixes, and carbon trading. Net zero emissions is woven into the language. If you have connections, tell them to remove the word net. The Climate Stewardship Act is nothing but markets and techno fixes. The Clean Future Act proposes a national clean energy standard that includes nuclear power, hydro dams. Here in Minnesota, Minnesota classified the energy coming from Manitoba Hydro that has flooded the lands of our Cree relatives in Canada. They classify it as clean energy. So next slide, just a summary again. I'm not going to go through the reading of that. That basically addresses what I talked about here. Next slide, the injustices and racism, neoliberalism, and the colonialism of carbon pricing schemes. That's part of the doctrines of discovery. It's part of patriarchy that came to our land. People who no longer had an understanding of that relationship of the to the woman and to Mother Earth. The same objectification is happening here right now with these capitalistic domestic carbon markets, and so that the carbon market is the WTO of the sky. Okay, and so I'm going to uh, next slide, carbon pricing. I have some resources you can link to. We'll send that out to you later. And so Mother Sky and Father Earth are not for sale. Be a sky protector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was a lot of information, and I think people can go onto the Indigenous Environmental Network website to actually do. There's so many reports, there's so much information, there's so much learning to uncover these false solutions, and we got to say no to net zero to actually get to zero. So thank you so much, Tom. Next up, we're going to hear testimony from 3 folks. So bear with us, folks. You do not want to miss it. Silas is a 13-year-old Anishinaabe who is active in the fight to stop Line 3 pipeline in Minnesota. I want to welcome Silas next up and hear his important message to us.
Okay, bonjour. I am Silas Nealon. I am from Rice Lake, Minnesota. I am 13 years old, and I am fighting Line 3. Where I live, we have one of the largest wild rice lakes in the world, and this pipeline is 13 miles away. Wild rice is who we are as people. Wild rice is life. You can't grow it off seeds. It grows in that lake. And this pipeline called Line 3 is threatening it. Same with our Mississippi. It's right next to our Mississippi. And the Mississippi River goes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And where we get some of our drinking water from. Line 3 is a replacement pipeline. But if you look, it's a whole new pipeline. And they're going to abandon the old pipeline. And so I want you to whoever's watching this, I want you to get more active on Line 3 and get Biden's attention, because the Biden administration has to change so far from the Trump administration. So I think he needs to know to respect their treaty, because this pipeline is also violating our 1855 treaty. So he needs to learn to respect that, and that the first people, the Native American people, said no to this Line 3. Now I'll pass it to Monica Lewis Patrick, President and CEO of We the People of Detroit, to tell us about the fight for clean water in Detroit.
Thank you so much, Silas. And I just can't tell you how honored and privileged I am to come behind all of that amazing brilliance and all of that power. As we see, not only from the work that has been done by the great father, Goldtooth, and the amazing work that Cindy is shepherding, but our future is extremely bright, and Silas is representing that right now leadership. But I'm Monica Lewis Patrick, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the president and CEO of We the People of Detroit. We're a small nonprofit in the city of Detroit that has been fighting for the human right to water. You may or may not know that over 181,000 households in the city of Detroit have been shut off from water since 2014. But it's not just an issue for the residents of Detroit. What we have found in places like Chicago, water rates have tripled over the last 8 years. If you go 45 minutes from Detroit to Toledo, Ohio, water rates have doubled there in the last year and a half. And just 45 minutes north of Detroit in historic Flint, Michigan, water rates right before COVID, Flint was paying some of the highest water rates in the nation, $250 a month for water that they cannot trust the quality of. And they were on pace to see their water rates double to the tune of $500 a month right before the COVID pandemic was declared. But what we know that human life cannot bear up under the burden of water toxicity, water quality issues. But what we know is if you can't even afford the water, then that becomes an issue too. And so what I would challenge us all to do is think about this. Prior to a pandemic, we were on pace, according to research that was done by Dr. Elizabeth Mack at Michigan State University, to see the nation, actually by this time next year, 2022, 35.6% of Americans will not be able to afford their water. So there is no way that we're going to build back better without ensuring that every American has access to clean, safe, and affordable water. When you talk about water infrastructure, what we know is that the US government, up until 1977, they were contributing about 67 to 69% of the dollars that were invested in water infrastructure. Now the American government is only contributing between 7 and 9%. So that gaping budgetary hole is landing on the backs of poor folks, Black and brown folks. And what we know is that we cannot survive without access to water. And so I know that my time is short, but I would ask you to go to our website at wethepeopleofdetroit.com, sign the pledge to support water affordability. What I know too is that it's a job creating opportunity if we will ensure that there's an investment in water infrastructure, but that investment in water infrastructure must be tied bar to the access to clean, safe, and affordable water. We have learned from our Indigenous family members that water is life, that it has a right to exist without being disturbed, controlled, commodified, or privatized. But we also know that we're in an amazing moment of being able to move from trauma into transformation. And so I'll leave you with the words of the greatest mayor in the city of Detroit, the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young. He told us if we found a good fight to get in it, Well, I'm telling you that we, the people of Detroit, and I'm hoping you will join me in the fight for the human right to water. So thank you so much for my time. It's been an extreme honor to be with you today. And I will pass the mic along to the amazing Reagan Patterson of the Red, Black, and Green New Deal.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Reagan Patterson, and I am one of the leaders of the Red, Black, and Green New Deal Working Group. First, I thank Valencia Gunder and Colette Pichon Battle, the lead organizers of the RBG New Deal, for trusting me to represent the group tonight. Now, under the assumption that this is a brave space, I want to share that as I was preparing this statement for tonight, I cried. And I cried because in order to talk about why we need an RBG New Deal, I had to sit in emotions that I had pushed down in order to make it through the week. This morning, I received several group messages from folks in community asking how people are feeling, to which I responded, I can't. Yesterday evening, I cried because of this singular yet significant act of morality in an amoral and dehumanizing criminal injustice system. And yet I was not allowed to sit in that for even 0.5 seconds before the murder of Ma'Khia Bryant was announced. I shared that with one friend and he replied saying, it can be easy to feel hopeless in a moment like this. But I told him, I don't feel hopeless. It just reasserts that there is no moment to pause until we reach abolition. Our relief only comes in abolitionist organizing that is sustained by knowing that it is okay to practice radical love through rest, because your comrades will keep going and be there when you're ready to jump back in. There are no moments of relief when a racial capitalist, imperialist, white supremacist state does one good deed. Because as we, or I guess I can only speak for myself, as I was reminded last night, that same state simultaneously and continuously asserts and reasserts its authority to commit violence against Black bodies, whether it is the killing of Ma'Khia Bryant while awaiting a guilty verdict, or the Army Corps of Engineers allowing the Dakota Access Pipeline to operate after a judge blocked it. And that is the very reason why we need an RBG New Deal. We cannot look to the state to center racial justice comprehensively, nor generate solutions for livable Black futures when this state has devalued Black life, including the lives of our children, for over 400 years. We see evidence of that after every unnatural disaster. Black communities are always hit first and worst. Just this past February, when the winter freeze caused frozen infrastructure and a strained energy grid due to failed government energy policy and action, I must add, it was Black communities that were among the first and faced the longest power outages. This left people without power, heat, food, water, and internet. And it particularly impacted the most vulnerable and disenfranchised, including low income, sick, elderly, differently abled, unhoused, and incarcerated folks. And in Jackson, Mississippi, inadequate water infrastructure, again, due to government policies, i.e. disinvestment, caused folks to have to go without water for over a month. And those are just the stories that made the news. Now, I will take a moment to say that the state is starting to take a step in the right direction. The Biden administration acknowledges the role that the federal government plays in producing and perpetuating racial violence. And I use that term deliberately to encompass the multiple forms of harm. And there are policies aimed to redress that, like the American Jobs Plan, which includes funding for Black farmers. On top of that, just this week, we've seen the introduction of several bills by Congress members, including the Green New Deal for Cities, co-sponsored by Representative Cori Bush. Again, a step in the right direction. However, Black lives, experiences, and knowledge must be centered in all climate policy for livable Black futures. And that is what the Red, Black, and Green New Deal is about. The Red, Black, and Green New Deal is a multifaceted initiative establishing the first national Black climate agenda, targeted climate justice communications campaigns, protective and preparatory grassroots-led strategies, and federal legislation that addresses the climate crisis and advances the vision for Black lives. We have 6 pillars: land, labor, water, energy, economy, and democracy. We will be conducting data and research, bottom-up organizing, federal policy, strategic communications, litigation, and international solidarity. We are doing a soft launch of the RBG New Deal tomorrow, Thursday, April 22nd. Please follow our hashtags, #RBGND, and check out our website tomorrow, redblackgreennewdeal.org, for updates. Now I'll pass it to Chris Matthews, a social justice music maker who lives in Washington, D.C.
I'm singer-songwriter Chris Matthews, and I'm lifting my voice alongside an incredible array of artists and activists in support of the Thrive Agenda. It's a blueprint for the future that tackles the various crises we face: economic inequality, public health, racism, climate change, with a plan to create dignified jobs for millions of unemployed workers. Working people can't wait years for jobs to come back. So, if we want to help, neither can we. Join us. Ask Congress to pass the Thrive Agenda and bring jobs back to our communities. Another chance to stand where we should, nation to nation. United for good to protect the earth, the air, the ocean, and woods. If history's taught us anything, it's that we share the same blood. Undervalued, underestimated, standing on a free family. We've got work to do, despite the progress we've made. If rising tides lift all boats, we can be that helping hand for those who need it most. If we wanna rise as one, if change is ever gonna come, we better transform thin paper into big action. So come alive, family, come alive. No more barely getting by. I want you to thrive. I want you to thrive, thrive, thrive. If we wanna rise as one, if change is ever gonna come, we better transform thin paper into.
Oh, that was amazing. Thank you so much to Ashley, to Cindy, Tom, Silas, Monica, Regan, and Chris, and to the organizers. It's been such a powerful and inspiring panel already. I'm Miya Yoshitani. I'm the executive director of the Asian Pacific Environmental Network. We're based in unceded Ohlone lands in Oakland, California. And APEN is a 28-year-old environmental justice organization rooted in poor and working class Asian American immigrant and refugee communities in the Bay Area and around the state of California, fighting for just solutions to the climate crisis in our neighborhoods where we live, work, and play. Just really appreciate everyone who's added to this inspiring panel. And already we've heard how, in this country, in California, around the world for that matter, the last 4 years have been about defending our communities from explicit racist and anti-immigrant attacks from a far right-wing agenda, and that's still growing. But thanks to Black-led organizing, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and working and poor and working class communities who are building power across the United States in places like Georgia, like Detroit, Michigan, like the Navajo Nation, like Minneapolis, Minnesota, like Standing Rock, North Dakota, or Louisiana and across the Gulf South. Thanks to that power building and organizing, we've been able to build the collective power and pull ourselves back from the cliff they've been trying to throw us off of. Together, we've created the opening for a fight for transformational solutions and for a government that can work for us, not against us. And that is what the Thrive Agenda is all about. So if you could please bring up the first slide. So we are facing multiple devastating and overlapping crises: the pandemic, racial injustice, economic devastation, and climate change. For our APEN members, what that looks like is breathing poison air next to a refinery during a massive wildfire, while at the same time family members are dying from COVID, while at the same time you're being laid off from your job, while at the same time you're trying to fight an eviction or a deportation, while you're being targeted for racist attacks just waiting for a bus. While at the same time, you're paying higher electricity bills to keep the lights on, and you're paying that to a utility that causes more wildfires. It's a horrifying mess, It's not just one thing, it's all of it all together. And that's why we need a recovery package that actually matches the scale of these crises on all fronts. And that's exactly what the Thrive Act does. Next slide, please. So our communities are literally at the breaking point, and we have to meet the scale of the crisis. There is no time for these half measures. The Thrive Act authorizes investments of at least $1 trillion per year for 10 years that will create more than 15 million family sustaining union jobs and the end of the unemployment crisis. Next slide, please. The Thrive Act will make economy-wide investments to take on injustice, pollution, and joblessness wherever we find it. It's going to invest in upgrading our infrastructure for clean water, affordable transit, housing, and reliable electric grid, which we know is so necessary to basic functions in life, given what happened in Texas. It's also going to expand access in our communities to wind and solar power, to electric vehicles, to healthy buildings. And it's going to protect our rural and urban spaces, our wetlands, our prairies, our forests, and ecosystems, and support family farmers. It's also going to invest in public institutions and care for children and the elderly, and for the workers who are making that economy run. The Thrive Act also ensures that those closest to the pain will be the closest to the power. That our communities who are on the front lines of systemic racism, the climate crisis, and economic insecurity must be on the front lines of building a more just economy. So the last slide, the Thrive Act calls for just investment to repair the harm from decades of underinvestment. It requires at least 50% of investments to be in frontline communities, the Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian American, and Pacific Islander, and the poor and working class communities that have borne the brunt of these crises and that have been excluded from benefits from past investments. And it also ensures that we do not invest in the false solutions that Tom was talking about, the market and techno fixes that continue to do harm in our communities. So what we're talking about is the right scale. We're talking about $1 trillion a year of investment over the next decade. We're talking about good standards, about strong labor, equity, and environmental standards, not just any jobs, but good jobs with strong wage and benefit guarantees, access to unions and organizing, and environmental justice standards to repair historic harms. So scale, standards, and the right scope. We're talking about economy-wide investments across different sectors. Our vision for the health, wealth, and self-determination of our communities has racial justice at the core. For our communities to be able to thrive and be resilient in the face of the climate crisis means not only that we have to have clean air, clean water, and a stable climate, it means that we need good jobs. We need housing, healthcare, public transit, and a thriving local economy. And it also means we need a functional democracy, we need a fair democracy, and we need to be safe from violence from the police and free from racist white supremacy attacks. True climate resiliency is racial justice. For Asian Americans, for Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities, we need to be working and building across our communities to reimagine safety and reimagine a thriving future together. Our call to you today is to help us pass the agenda of the Thrive Act, to make the 2020s the decade of the Green New Deal. To help us, go to thriveagenda.com or to greennewdealnetwork.org and help us make 10,000 calls to Congress demanding that $10 trillion over 10 years for racial justice and a just transition of our economy to 100% clean energy by 2035. We have so much to grieve, so much loss, and so much work ahead of us. But the sacrifices that we've made and the power that we've built has created this opportunity for transformation, the opportunity to dream our resilient and thriving communities for generations to come. To call back to the beautiful grounding offered by Ashley Henderson, may it be so, may it be so, may we be free. I'm going to pass it back to Cindy.
Thank you so much, Miya. Just incredible, right? This vision, this visionary demand, this articulation that has come out of movements from the environmental justice climate movement, long labor folks, youth, students, immigrant communities, Black communities, Indigenous communities. And I think that one of the big takeaways for me is just saying, you know, there's some lines in the sand, like as Tom Goldtooth reminded us, right? We got to say no to the carbon markets, to false solutions, say no to net zero, to actually get to zero. You know, Ashley reminded us that yesterday was only accountability for one officer, not justice, and that we actually need to think about not only defunding the police, but actually abolishing the police. That Silas, with such just like vision and such determination, asked us to pressure the Biden administration to say no to Line 3 in Minnesota. Monica, fearless, amazing long-term elder and fighter, just reminded us we cannot survive without clean and affordable water, and to get involved in making sure that everyone in this country and actually around the world has access to water, because water is life. And Regan, thank you so much for sharing the impact and why a visionary demand of the Red, Black, Green New Deal is so important, because it's about land, it's about labor, it's about water, it's about energy, it's about democracy, it's about Black liberation. And Chris, that singing, right? Just the role of cultural workers, taking our demands and making a song saying, I want you to thrive, right? And Miya reminding us so clearly that our solutions need to actually meet the scale of the multiple and colliding crises. And what I want to leave you with is just that we have the solutions, y'all. We have the solutions. We have proven that we can win. We have proven, we have forecasted all of these crises, but we have the solutions. And I want to remind us that we don't have to look elsewhere, but our communities, but people who've been organizing for so long, that have been saying what it is we need. I want us to close out also by recognizing there's been so much death. And one person who was a hero to many of us in the environmental and climate justice movement just passed away. Our sister LaDonna Brave Bull Allard from Standing Rock Sioux tribal tribe. She was a historian. She was a water protector. She was the one who invited and founded the Sacred Stone Camp on her own land in April 2016 to resist the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. LaDonna's fierce love for Mother Earth ignited a global movement for water and for life. And I want to remember people like LaDonna, right? That as tomorrow, these 40 global leaders that debate how to solve the ecological crisis, we got to think about people like LaDonna, Berta Cáceres, Ken Saro-Wiwa, people who, and everyone who has given their life to protect land, water, and our future. Let's continue to process the grief that all of us have been feeling, from those that we have lost in this last year because of COVID, to the countless people and children that we have lost at the hands of the state. We remember them, we honor them, we say their names, and we know that we gotta fight like hell for the living. So I wanna thank you so much for being here tonight with us. This is our last mass call, but we know that our movement is gonna continue our organizations are getting stronger, and we're building with each other. And I want you to mark your calendar to join us for the Keep It 100 teach-in on May 15th from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time Zone. And it would mean the world to us that those of you who have been active in this campaign, Frontline campaign, that you will keep accompanying us through this year, because you were part of helping defeat a neo-fascist, misogynist, climate denier, racist pig. You were part of helping change the composition of the Senate. We have made meaning together of the current conditions. But most importantly, we have been part of that bigger we that not only has been envisioning the new world, but actively making it happen. I want to send so much love and gratitude to all the folks that have pulled these mass calls together, our organizers, our thinkers, the staff at the front lines, our tech team, our interpreters, all of our speakers who have joined us all along, all the people doing outreach, communications. So much of this has been a collective effort. And we have so much love and gratitude for all of you who have joined and been taking action and being part of this and amplifying the work of the front line. And so with that, as our dear sister Asada Shakur says, we must love each other and protect each other, and we have nothing to lose but our chains. Wish you a very good night and much love, and make sure that you keep following the Frontline's work, and see you back here on May 15th from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. Muchas gracias. Thank you.